Hey guys, it's Mathel here once again, and I want to put out a pretty definitive and final version or guide of the character I've been playing for the first week of the Blight League launch. And that is the Poison Assassin, which at this point is basically a Cobra Lash, Dagger based assassin poison build. That's the skill I've pretty much stuck with, and that's the setup I've been doing. The character's almost level 94, and I've cruised on through just about every map in the game now, almost all the red tiers, killed a red elder, and just about to start Guardians, which I'm confident is going to go rather well, but I didn't quite get to that stage just yet. That said, I do know that it's going to work out fairly well, and it's good enough now to give you what is everything I've learned about the character and a full sort of rundown and guide on the gear you're going to need, the passives you should be using, and the way to sort of fine-tune these types of poison characters. It doesn't have to be an assassin, could easily be a pathfinder, doesn't have to be Cobra Lash, could be Venom Gyre, could be using a few other skills, maybe even the melee side of things, because I have tested out Pestilence Strike too, and that thing actually does farm quite handily. It's not at all something to be skipped or slept on. It's definitely a huge sort of clear skill for the melee side of things if you'd rather do that or avoid using daggers altogether. So the character currently in its state, you can see here, did pick up a Bino's Dagger, which lets your poison proliferate to other enemies, and it's extremely effective for clear. As the dagger version of this build, I felt so much better putting on a Binos because that just started my clear chain sort of cascade so much nicer against all of the thicker packs and all of the Blight tower defense encounters. It's just really, really quality of life to have some sort of pro lift for a skill like Cobra Lash. So it's, for me, I don't think I'd really like to play this build without the Prolif, meaning it's either the Dagger version with Binos or you're using a Pathfinder version with Claws so that you can still have some level of Prolif. A lot of people have said that they're doing Claw versions and they don't have any Prolif, and it still works fine, and that's totally okay. And if you're still doing well with that, no problems, but I think I just like the Prolif a bit too much to drop it. I have taken on a few of these sorts of high-tier blighted maps. This here is just a tier 10 at the moment, Lava Chamber, which has a kind of interesting mechanic. This fire on the ground lava stuff here actually cleans up mobs for you. So depending on the right blighted map, you might have a much easier time or a much harder time as to all of the waves spawning and showing up at your doorstep. Usually, once you're pretty well established with your towers, you don't actually have to do too much killing of your own. The towers will start to take care of business, and it does feel kind of like a proper tower defense game at that point. But you can always do a lot of your own killing and make up for the lack of tower building. I did have one sort of failed attempt here in a tier 15 siege. It was the first time I was trying a really high tier blighted map, and I was doing okay. I was setting up the towers. I didn't quite have the best tower setup just yet, and then a couple of bosses spawned, and I do want to show you what can happen if you have some nasty bosses and some stuff where you just don't know what's going to happen, really. I had no idea what these bosses did, never seen them before. I was trying to kill them before they got to the pump, and that meant I was fairly within melee range of them, trying to see what they were doing and stuff, and they just shat on me. So this will be the example right here. A couple of these big monkey type bosses that pound the ground, evidently, and it's going to be pretty tough as a melee to get through that type of shit. I had no indication that was going to happen, and then I was right next to them and just got destroyed. Absolutely no chance of surviving if you're anywhere near them, because it's just a tier 15 boss. It didn't have any dangerous map mods, but that ground pound ability is, just more than I'm supposed to be able to handle. I do have a couple of examples of my single target in like tier 13 or 14 Red Elder. There's a bit of poison ramp, as there always is with the poison builds, but it's fairly respectable damage, all things considered, because there's nothing special going on in my damage setup. It's a Binos, it's a pretty basic corroded fossil Dagger in the offhand, and we're still hitting something like 2 to 3 million poison DPS, and the survivability and the sustain from Assassin is pretty damn nice, even though the life pool isn't anything too huge. So overall, it's a fairly well-rounded character. It doesn't cost too much. It can clear the entire game. And for me personally, it's been an absolute pleasure to play. It's probably my favorite starter build I've done for any PoE league. And I've just been clocking in so many hours, really enjoying my character and really enjoying the league as a whole. But I think a lot of that is stemming from the fact that I'm just enjoying the character I'm currently playing. So I do want to show you guys just about everything about the character, gear-wise, passive-wise, and crafting-wise, so that you can follow my footsteps if you want to play a similar sort of setup. So here is my character in its current form, level 93, called Deeply Confused, almost level 94, and yeah, I've got the whole mystery box Clown Fiesta microtransactions on. It's pretty much all from mystery box, and yeah, I don't know, I wasn't too sold on it until I actually saw some of it in game. Not a big fan of the clown stuff, but it actually does look kind of funky, and I think it's just a bit of a novelty to see something so quirky when running around. So enough of that. I do have the Binos knife. That is basically what the build is based around on the Dagger side of things. Up until I had the Binos, I didn't really feel too good about my clear with Cobra Lash, didn't feel too good about my poisoning setup. Once I got the Binos in, you can see the mod on killing a poisoned enemy, nearby enemies are poisoned, so that's poison proliferation. Once you have some stacks of poison on something and it dies, all of that chains to other packs. And you will notice that once you get this on, you can just spread poison throughout an entire group by killing like one enemy, and it feels really good, especially for blight encounters with lots of tower defense mechanics of just lots of stuff coming out, and then you hit one of them, it dies, and it goes spreads throughout everything. Pathfinder has a very similar mechanic, and it's probably ultimately a better poison ascendancy still, but Assassin is very competitive, and if you're playing an Assassin currently with this type of setup, you should feel pretty good with a Binos in your main hand. You then have your offhand of fucking whatever. What you're looking for is this corroded fossil modifier of 60% chance for your poisons inflicted with this weapon to deal 100% more damage. Now, the weapon itself doesn't have very much damage on it, but that's not really important because a lot of our damage is coming from Cobra Lash itself, dealing 120 to 180 chaos, and then added chaos damage support. You then got a bit of chaos damage on a ring, a bit of chaos damage on your amulet, you do get a bit of flat fizz from your Herald of Purity, and all of a sudden you're barely relying on the base damage of the weapon at all. So really what you're looking for is this 100% more modifier. If you can get it with the right rolls, maybe some extra physical, maybe a big flat added chaos mod. Some attack speed would be really good. Despair on hit isn't too bad. This is a pretty average version of the weapon, but it's the best I could get with the rolls I tried. And ideally, how you're trying to craft these daggers or claws is by using corroded fossil, metallic fossil, and aberrant fossil in a three-way. If you can really be screwed and afford it, then the fourth fossil into a four-way is shuddering, and it should make for a pretty easy weapon. All you're really looking for is that mod with just about anything else, but the best ones will have attack speed, chaos damage, the fossil mod of 100% more, maybe some fizz, blind, maybe some chaos damage multiplier. There's plenty to look for in these things, but it's pretty easy, pretty basic weapon to craft as a secondary to your Binos. The rest of the gear, very straightforward. You're just looking for life and resists wherever you can get it. For belt, I really do like the reduced flask charges used mod, especially on an assassin because you don't have that much flask sustain. What this mod does is basically let you have probably a third use of a flask instead of just two uses, like on this one and that one, and it just makes flask management throughout boss fights a lot simpler. You then have just life resists, some resists, a bit of accuracy on that one, life, some crit multi. If you can get flat fizz, that's good too. But then you can always just try and craft flat chaos. It's a very powerful craft as a spare prefix to your jewelry slots, and it's pretty damn cheap. So I do try and recommend going for those added chaos crafts. I did end up having to put non-channeling skills minus mana cost as one prefix on one of my rings, just so I could have a more comfortable spam of my skill when I've only got this much mana unreserved. And then a helm that just has a bit of accuracy. And the enchant I've gone with is just Skitterbot's 90% increased area. So something that is a very common question at the moment is why Skitterbots? Why Skitterbots over Malevolence in your build? Basically, the Skitterbots are just a couple of little bots that run around. They're immune to damage, and they will try their best to stand next to enemies you're attacking and give permanent shock and chill auras. If you hold Alt, you can see there that aura shock increases damage taken by 20%. So these things will just increase your damage to that mob by 20% pretty damn reliably. And that's for 35% mana reserve. I think it's a pretty good use of 35% mana. Straight up, Malevolence versus Skitterbots, Malevolence is better, but it's a 50% mana cost reserve. And ideally, I'd be running Skitterbots plus Malevolence over my two Heralds, but right now it's about the same damage gain as Malevolence, running these two auras for 50%. The difference is I will have 4 minions from Herald of Purity and an additional minion from Herald of Agony, so it's just more worth doing these two auras over Malevolence. And then a level 1 Precision, I'm just using it for the 40% crit chance because I've managed to cap my accuracy without any accuracy from the Precision itself. So if you have a good Malevolence Watcher's Eye, it's definitely going to be better. If you don't, then I think the 2 Herald setup is going to be just a bit stronger. And careful not to use too much mana early on. I only added Herald of Purity to my build rather recently because you'll only have the mana available for still attacking by the time you're fairly high level. If you're still at like level 70, level 80, chances are you can't reserve all of your mana this way because you just won't have the leftover mana. Now, speaking of mana, I do get asked a lot how I manage my mana with leech and stuff. Currently, it's through Stabbing Thirst. This node over here has some mana leech attached to it. If you're the claw side of things, then that node over here gives you your mana leech. Until I actually got these nodes and properly committed to daggers, I was just running this 1 point over here, and any 1 point of mana leech should honestly fix your mana for you, but I get it from here. I also get my life leech from there, and as far as the rest of the passive tree is concerned, there's not too much else to mention from sort of a changing standpoint from the past few sort of videos and also the starter build video. You can honestly drop Growth and Decay, it's not that good. You can respec here or there to get some different things like Dire Torment, maybe Twin Terrors. You could respec into Dazzling Strikes. You can get much more life if you really want, but I think this is pretty close to the ultimate setup for my passive tree, and I did anoint on my Amulet Flaying. I think that's the single biggest damage passive for my character, something like 9 or 10% damage for the one node. But other good things were Depth Perception if you're really missing accuracy. Twin Terrors is a pretty close second to damage for my character. You can do lots of different things like that. You can go pure defensive and get something like a big life node. There's a lot to do with the anointings, and you really have to make your own choices as to what you want to do there. Now, my character doesn't have all that much life at the moment. It's like 5,500. I could shoot for 6k if I want to drop a bit of damage and spec into the life and the life over here. But I think for the most part, bet something like this is fine for most endgame content, considering we do have a fair amount of reduced damage taken from things like Mistwalker, things like Opportunistic, a good amount of life regen here, and as well as that, just a good strong uptime on our Elusive with Withering Step, and Elusive does add quite a lot of defense as well. Besides that, what else should I be saying? Cobra Lash 6 link in the end game was still GMP, Unbound Ailments, Deadly Ailments, Added Chaos, and Vicious Projectiles, and I swap in Vile Toxins for single target over the GMP whenever I want really big boss damage, which currently doesn't happen too often. And then I did try out Venom Jaya. I just can't really get around it. It requires some Pierce, it probably requires some Fork. Feels like a bit too much investment for your clear to feel good, and then your single target feels kind of crap. And Pestilence Strike, you'd probably set up with something like Ancestral Call, some more melee sort of supports. But with Ancestral Call just by itself, you can start to notice the Pestilence Strike cleans up packs like nothing else. It's such huge overkill damage, and it's actually not too bad for single target as well, but Viper Strike would be a better single target in the end as a swap during the Pestilence Strike sort of skill. Lastly, I will say that while your gear is kind of weak, while your character is leveling, you will find that Plague Bearer plays a big role in your clear. So you stack up to about 1,000,000 damage, and then you press Plague Bearer, and when you're running at things, they die. Once you start to get to the stages that my character's at, you rarely actually need Plague Bearer for clearing. You're just basically using it for, well, additional single target damage. You press it when you really need it for a certain pack, or when you really need it against a boss. And it just starts to take a sort of back seat in your game at that point. And lastly, the path of building for the character looks something like this. It's got about 2.1 million damage. That's not factoring in shock or a few other things, but that's basically all we have. And if you're trying to set it up similar to mine, make sure you're using, taking out your GMP and putting in your proper single target setup. And the Wither Totem setup, I usually count as about 10 stacks. A lot of the time it will get to 15 stacks on your single target, but sometimes it won't. And I just like to have a middle ground of about 10 Wither stacks there. And other thing I wanted to talk about was jewels. I tried to fill out my life on jewels as well over here. So a little bit of life, a little bit of attack speed, a little bit of life, a little bit of attack speed, and damage over time multiplier. And it's really going to be something you want to focus on, trying to squeeze as much life out of every gear slot as possible. So that's why I went with life on jewels. That's why I went with just a pristine crafted life chest, though the temple life chests are going to take you a lot further if you just want to buy one of those and try and link it up. And you do want to squeeze as much life as you can out of the build without having to take the passives for life, because there's so many good damage passives everywhere that you're just trying to avoid life as much as possible. That's a bit deep. And I think that's roughly all we need to say. Coralitos, Witchfire, Binos, those are the staples. They're pretty cheap, pretty easy to get. They might be a bit more expensive after a video like this, but for endgame setup, they do carry you rather hard, and it is a pretty strong setup overall. Hopefully I've covered every base. That's the Poison Dagger Assassin video for the guide, and I will also leave you with my tier 15 clear of a blighted map, how it went, and you can see exactly what a successful run looks like, and whether or not you should tackle it yourself. It's not too bad at the moment with the lag if you're killing things just right and appropriately, but it does still, I think, take quite a PC to do one of these. So thank you very much for watching, hope you enjoyed the video, and see you next time. Start with that, and let's not fuck this up this time. We'll have that ready to go. Okay, so I'll upgrade that slowly as I can. This will be an arc one. I don't have anything I want to put around here yet. Do I? Damn it. Nice tower defense game. Where you can't actually build shit where you want. Until it gives you the option slightly later on down the track. Red Meteors? Sure, but I want minions to like guard my thing as our last line of defense, basically. Stall stuff as much as it can right at the end. That's kind of my idea there. For that back attachment, the current mystery boxes. It's a pretty rare drop from them. Okay, so now we're going to be up this way. Another arc tower there, chill tower there. This chill tower needs a big upgrade. Damn, crabs spawned twice. Must be getting close to spawning some bosses and shit, right? That's a boss. Cool. Okay. I'm getting slightly overwhelmed now. As in, I'm not building enough for what I'm doing. I want some more stuff to build around here, for God's sake. Okay, this one will be a meteor. Honestly, I feel I'm not very good at this yet. I'm very used to it. And not micromanaging as well as I'd like to. Make another meteor here. Leave those towers up like that. Alright, now we can start building a few around here. That's good. Let's build one boost tower. Build a few meteors. Do that. Oh shit, there's a portal right here. That's no good. See a fat boss walking around. Need a shock arc tower here. Oh shit, how did something get to the goddamn thing? Okay. Things are getting intense. I'll build another meteor tower or something, I think. Any other building spots around here? Another meteor tower there, right? Things seem pretty under control at the moment. Base is pretty well established at the moment, yeah. It's not that reliant up to me killing stuff. Need some beefed up meteors and arc towers, and hey, not bad. Actually survived and did it. I mean, yeah, if you can set up a nice base, Siege isn't too bad. It's fairly condensed, you know, for your building, so it's not too much of a clusterfuck. It's good. It's good. If we get our 30C back. So we got what, one T14 map. T13. Some money back too.